Hey, what's up guys? Alex here with a new video, and today I want to do my first impressions and maybe review of the new Sony A7Cr. If you're new to the channel, I am a portrait photographer based out of Miami, Florida, and I primarily shoot with Sony and Leica. I've been using the Sony A7R5 as my main workhorse camera since it launched, which was right about a year ago, and if you look back at my last year of YouTube videos, they have been shot with the Sony A7R5. This camera is absolutely incredible. The autofocus, the sensor, I personally think it's one of the best hybrid cameras on the market. But I don't use it. I mean, I use it for YouTube and I use it when I'm getting paid for photography. But if I want to go out and have fun, I never take out the Sony A7R5. As good as the camera is, it stays in the office. I choose to shoot with Leica and other cameras to have fun, and I keep the Sony A7R5 as my workhorse camera. Why am I talking about the A7R5? That's because the Sony A7Cr essentially is the same camera in a more compact body and a silver finish, but the shooting experience is drastically different. I purchased this camera and I have fallen in love with this camera. This is the most fun I've had shooting with a Sony camera ever. So for today's video, like I said, it's a first impressions because I've only had the camera for about 3 weeks. Kind of review because I've shot with the same sensor now on the Sony A7R5 for a year, so I know what to expect. So we'll call it both, first impression / review. Anyways, like I do with all my videos, I will be providing image samples for you to download and check out so you can see the image quality coming out of this camera and you can decide for yourself if you think it's worth it. What's really cool is Sony also offers the Sony A7C, same body, almost the exact same features, but with a 33 megapixel sensor, and it's a little bit more affordable, and that might be the camera to get if you don't want resolution. With the A7Cr, you kind of do get an A7C as well because this camera can shoot in 3 different resolutions. You can shoot in full 61 megapixel RAW. You can also shoot in a compressed medium RAW, which is 26 megapixels, and a small RAW, which is 18 megapixels. I think that's correct. Which means you have the flexibility to shoot lower megapixels if you want to save on memory card space and not have the largest files. To me, that's why this camera system is so flexible. You don't always have to shoot at 61 megapixels. Now, if you're into Leica, you might be thinking, wait a minute, that sounds a lot like the Leica Q3, Leica M11, and they also share a 61 megapixel sensor. I've had the theory for the longest time that Leica is using this exact same Sony sensor. And I mean, I could be wrong, but it's pretty likely, which means another way to look at the Sony A7Cr is like a Leica Q with interchangeable lenses. Anyways, this sensor on the A7Cr is so flexible and it is just absolutely stunning. 61 megapixels can be overkill, but the amount of detail you get, I think rivals medium format. The dynamic range you get is just more than you'll ever need. Low light is its weakness. I would say you can shoot up to ISO 3200 comfortably. ISO 6400 gets noisy, but with Adobe Lightroom's latest denoise AI, you can shoot at 6400 and use that and you're pretty set because it's such a high resolution sensor. You have so much more detail to use and you get better noise reduction. So from an image quality perspective, this camera and this sensor, it's more than you'll ever need, and that's why I like it so much. But let's talk about what makes this camera fun to use. This camera is small and compact, and it feels great in the hand if you have the added grip. The added grip comes included with the Sony A7Cr. It's optional for the Sony A7C, or you can buy the small rig grip, which I have here attached to my camera, and it's a smaller, prettier version of the grip, and it does the job. What it really does is it gives you the extra space for your pinky to land and give you that good grip. But you can see how compact and small this camera is. I didn't even realize how light it was until I picked it up next to my Sony A7R5 and I realized that camera is significantly heavier than the A7Cr. This paired with small primes. I'm gonna do a video on the kit I've been using later, but this paired with small primes like this 50 Sigma f2 is almost a Leica experience. And I say that because you have the small compact camera, you have a lens with an aperture ring, and it just feels very analog. You have all the dials, everything just feels so good, and it's fun to use. It's not heavy. You actually want to take this camera out of your bag. I've been having so much fun taking this camera with me everywhere, and I never thought I would say that about a Sony camera. One thing I was scared of is this camera does not have a joystick. Now, with Sony's latest autofocus and AI detection, I'm gonna say you really don't need a joystick. So for the most part, the autofocus on this camera nails what I wanna nail every single time. There are times where there's multiple people, where I'm trying to shoot something specific and there's like a sea of things, so the camera will focus on something differently. And it's just as easy as tapping on what I want to focus, and the camera will just focus and track that subject. So I thought I was gonna miss the control of a thumbstick, but I really didn't, because the touchscreen tap to track is really, really good with this camera, and I've had zero complaints. I don't know what else to say about this camera. Battery life is great, image quality is great, ergonomics with a grip are pretty good. I'm not gonna say great because they could be improved. I also do have a thumb support in the back to give me that extra kind of point of contact, which I think is needed with a small body like this. But I wanted to make this video just to share how much I've loved using this camera. I'm gonna say this, and I don't know if it's gonna last forever or if I'm still in the honeymoon period. I haven't taken my Leica Q3 out since I got this camera. That might sound crazy, but if you're familiar with the channel, I've always been a fan of the 50mm focal length. This was my favorite focal length. I love a 50mm lens. And I've always said if Leica made the Leica Q with a 50mm lens, that would be my favorite camera, period. Well, here, I've had this Sigma f2 glued to this camera, and it's essentially a Leica Q with a 50mm. And I've just been loving this experience. It goes with me everywhere. With that said, do I recommend this camera? I think if you're looking for a hybrid camera and you really want kind of a do-it-all camera, this could be for you. I do have to say, if you're a working professional, there are some cons to this camera that you need to consider. One, it has one SD card slot, so you don't have that redundancy built in, and that is super important if you're doing weddings or professional work where you don't have the opportunity to do redos and you just can't afford a memory card going down. Two, the viewfinder is a smaller viewfinder. I only say that because I know a lot of people out there still use a viewfinder as a primary way to take pictures. I personally use the screen. I hardly use the viewfinder, so it hasn't been an issue for me, and the screen has been good enough where I haven't had any complaints. It's not as high res as the A7R5, but unless you're comparing them, you're really not gonna notice it. Battery life has been solid, and I think the only thing to think about if you're a professional is lenses. So I've been using this camera with smaller compact lenses, and it's been fun to use, it's been great. But if you put on like the Sony 50mm 1.2 G Master, which I have on this camera, that lens is so big and so front heavy that it doesn't really make it a comfortable camera to hold. The ergonomics are just thrown off drastically, and it's very front heavy. So if you're looking at this camera for a professional environment, we're gonna be using larger lenses, a 24-70, the 51.2, a 70-200. This might not be the camera to get as your A camera. I still think the A7R5 is better from that perspective. But if you're looking for a B camera or a fun camera, a camera you want to take with you everywhere and also be able to use professionally, you cannot go wrong with the Sony A7Cr or the A7C. I really think Sony just nailed it with this one, and I can't believe I'm saying a Sony camera is fun to use. Anyways, download some of the files, check out the image quality. Let me know if you've played with one of these cameras and what your thoughts are down below. As always, guys, if you like this video, please hit the like button, please subscribe. And if you want to see the 3-lens kit I've put together for the Sony A7Cr. Stay tuned because that will be my next video. As always, have a good one, and I will see you on the next one. Peace.